All right, it's time once again for a meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont. Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, you know how we start these things every week. I'm flipping it right to Joanne Hulbert. Joanne, you got a poem for us, don't you?
Well, I do actually, and I was looking around. And I couldn't find anything on Jimmy Wood. I was gonna just paste in his name on one from Joe Wood, but that seemed kind of cheap. So anyway, so then I decided that I was gonna find one, a poem that was published on April 27th. So I looked around, I found one, and I didn't like it at all. It was really terrible, but I did happen to find one that was on April 29th and also another on April 26th. All right. Now, the April 26th one is way too long and it's really kind of silly, the gladdest day of all the year. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. But lucky for us, April 29th was a real short poem and it comes right to the point. And what it is, a timely tune. File your voices keenly, tune the loud bazoo, split the air with bellows till the breeze turns blue. After months of silence, give your whoopings play. Time has come for action. Baseball starts in play. And that was out of the Sporting Life, April 29th,
Wow.
1905. I'm sorry. It was a little bit on a rush job today because I just came in from a meeting at like 6:30 and it was running through. And I did look up for Jimmy Wood, but I couldn't find anything in the Chicago papers because when he was playing, they just weren't adding in poetry into the stuff. But they did have an awful lot to say about him. So you've got a lot to say about him.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
He does. We're going to get to him in just a minute, but I need to go to Joe Ross right now. Joanne, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne.
Ross,
thanks very much.
What is your favorite entry in Today in Baseball history? Go.
Thank you, Bruce, and good evening, everyone. One of the things I like to do is find the things that you might not see in too many other places. And this one comes from 1902 and concerns a player that you probably don't know by the name of Jim St. Vrain, V-R-A-I-N, if you really care. He's a right-handed pitcher who played for Chicago. On this particular date, he was sent to the plate as a pinch hitter. Unfortunately, he grounded to shortstop Honus Wagner, who threw him out at first by what you might say was a huge margin. That was made easier because St. Vrain ran toward third. The Cubs lost to the Pittsburgh Pirates 2-0. And I know you're not going to believe this, but this was St. Vrain's only year in the major leagues.
No.
And that's a little bit of what happened today.
Okay.
In baseball history.
Joe, how do they get it?
Thanks, Joe.
That is available to all SABR readers for only $10 by sending an email to me, J&E Ross, that's A-N-D-E, Ross at gmail.com.
There you go. I am on that list. It's a lot of fun to read. You will like it too. Get a hold of Joe if you would like to become involved. Where is my guy, Jeff Cohen?
I'm over here, Bruce.
Jeff, what's going on with the podcast?
On my screen, I'm right next to you. So on this week on Baseball and BB podcast, we have the writer, Ken Davidoff, who wrote a book about 101 life lessons from the dugout. It's a great book for anybody, any parent who has kids in the game. It's really a terrific life lessons. I mean, you really learn a lot about life through baseball. So it's a terrific book, and please, it's coming out this Saturday on all your podcast apps.
How's the other one doing? The New York State Hall of Fame podcast.
New York State Hall of Fame podcast. That's doing okay. It's doing very, very good. This week we have the director of the New York State's Hall of Fame, Rennie LaRue, who's also a co-host, as he was talking about his latest induction, which was the Basketball Hall of Fame, and his next one is the Hockey Hall of Fame. But the Baseball Hall of Fame is always in November, and I know this year they're going to be inducting Al Leiter and Roger Clemens and Joe Girardi as among the some of the players who are going to be inducted into the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame.
That's fantastic. If you're not getting those podcasts in your podcatcher, you are missing out on a lot of good entertainment, especially what I like to call the flagship podcast there, Baseball and Barbecue, because I mean, it's baseball and food, and it's especially barbecue. I mean, what more could you ask for? Point your podcatchers toward those two, grab them each week, and buckle up and get entertained. Jeff, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Bruce.
My pleasure. Thank you, man. Hey, Megan, where are you?
I'm right here.
There she is. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I am great. We are up against it for the spring issue of the newsletter, are we not?
Yes, we are. Yes.
And
Yes.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yes, I think it will go out to the chapter members next Monday, a week from today, and then hopefully to the rest of Sabre in the newsletter the following Friday.
That is great. How many articles do we have this time? Just because now I'm interested.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I don't remember exactly how many, but I can tell you that it's clocking in at just south of 30 pages. So there are quite a few.
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
What? 30 pages?
Yes.
Oh
yes.
This is fantastic.
But I think it's going to be terrific. I think all really great articles. I'm really excited about it. I think there's going to be a little something for everybody. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really great issue.
And I know that Gus has his article in there as well.
Yes, he does.
Yep,
yes,
he is continuing the tradition. I love it. This is great. We cannot wait for the spring edition. If you have something that you would like, as I whack myself in the nose with my microphone here, I need to tighten that up. Hey, if you have something for the newsletter that you would like in summer or fall, if that's what you're writing for, I'm going to assume, Megan, that we've got some room in the summer issue. Is that correct?
Absolutely, we do. Yes.
Get a hold of Megan directly at mfullerhanna@comcast.net.
That's correct.
She is your go-to for that, for all things newsletter, and will be able to consult with you and get you all set up. And we are very, very proud to have her as part of our chapter and as our newsletter editor. So, Megan, thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Alex stays in the chat. Is saying that if anyone wants to manage the Mets, you could text him at the number in the chat. Alec, don't expect any texts. Matter of fact, if he's trying to solicit for the Red Sox, I don't think anybody's going to text for that one either. Hey, let's get on with our feature presentation. In 1870, the New York Clipper called James Jimmy Wood the kingpin of second base. And historians William J. Ryczek, it's Bill Ryczek, I know Bill, and Pete Morris recognized him as a giant of early baseball. A well-known and respected player of the day, Wood captained Chicago's White Stockings in 1870 and 1871. An accidental knife wound to his right leg during the 1873-1874 offseason led to infection and the amputation of the limb. Outfitted with an artificial leg, he was able to manage the Chicago team in 1874 and 1875, but not hired in 76 after Albert Spalding assumed the managerial duties. Wood also held a variety of jobs around the country following his Chicago baseball career. Sabres favorite raconteur Jack Bales retired in 2020 after more than 40 years as the reference and humanities librarian at the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Besides articles for assorted baseball publications, he is the author of 2 books on the Chicago Cubs, and he is back with us tonight. And his new presentation, the original Mr. Cub, the life and unfortunate times of Jimmy Wood, Jack Bales.
Okay.
Welcome back,
much,
my
Bruce.
guy. How you doing?
Thank you very much, Bruce. I'm doing fine. Okay. Let me share my screen here. And there we go. And let me click on this here. And let me click on share my screen. And
there it is.
There it is. And let me click on this thing over here. There we go. Okay, great. Let me make sure all goes well, and it does. Okay, thank you very much, Bruce. And you're right. Jimmy Wood was called the kingpin of second base, and Bill and Peter did recognize him as a giant of early baseball. He was one of the most famous baseball players, not just a famous White Stocking player of the 19th century. And of course, I was interested in him being, I'm especially interested in the White Stockings during the 19th century. And I found some things that are brand new about him, and I think they're going to send you. I'm going to bowl you over, I think, toward the end here. You will not believe some of the stuff I'm going to reveal to you about his life, his personal life, and especially some brand new facts I found out about his death. And I've been corresponding a little bit with John Thorne about this too, and we had some nice things to say. And in fact, John Thorne in 2014 called Jimmy Wood a mystery man. And for example, right here, both Baseball Reference and Retro Sheet state that he was born in Brooklyn, New York. Census reports indicate Canada. Concerning his birth date, he was born on December 1, but for the year I've come across 1842, 1843, and 1844. In addition, it wasn't until fairly recently when the great researcher Peter Morris discovered facts about his death. And I think I'll be able to add a little bit to that, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And as I said, while researching, I found a few other facts too, which I want to pass on and everything. I've examined all the censuses around in the 19th century and in the 20th century, and Baseball Reference and Retro Sheet go with 1843, which is what the 1860 and 1910 census indicates. He was 16 years old here, which based on his December birth date indicate that he was born in 1843. And that's what I'm going to be going with too. Jimmy's family settled in Brooklyn, whereas the census report knows he was an apprentice machinist, but he had quite a bit of spare time, which he spent on the baseball field. He was a member of the National Association's Harlem Club as early as 1856. When he was at 13 years old, I guess. And an article in the Chicago Republican notes that at an early age he helped organize the Marians, a club in Williamsburg, New York, which was a Brooklyn neighborhood. And the article said that he was both captain and a catcher on the Brooklyn team. Now, Wood was still playing for the Marians when he joined the Eckford Club of Brooklyn. And in fact, in this game day coverage of an October 4th, 1860 game against the New York Empire Club, he did more than a credible job as a brand new member and at just age 16 because he'd be 17 on December 1. He would continue to play well throughout the 1860s, as this article points out in the coverage of a September 1869 game against the Philadelphia Athletics. Let's get to Chicago. He soon increased his own baseball stature in the community when the New York Clipper announced in October 1869 that the Chicago Baseball Club was organized, which would be called the Chicago White Stockings, due to what one paper called the, quote, snowy purity of their hose. Jimmy Wood soon agreed to captain the team, and as the first player signed, he became in essence the first Chicago Cub, or as I put it, he was the original Mr. Cub, way ahead of Ernie Banks. He quickly brought on a number of men, including some of his old pals on the Brooklyn Eckford team. The New York Sun, in a November 25, 1869 article about the whole signing of the players, mentioned that Wood, quote, is without doubt the best second base player in the country, and he will receive $2,000 for the playing season. Now, the payroll was rather high, and it seemed that these high salaries were enough to win only games against amateur teams. The club was mocked as a quote-unquote $18,000 nine. Matters came to a head on July 23rd, 1870, in which a game against the New York Mutuals, they lost 9-0, the very first member of the National Association to be held scoreless in a professional game. And with that game, a new verb, Chicago'd, entered the baseball vocabulary, which meant that the team was shut out. Now, Jimmy Wood and the White Stockings knew that something had to be done here, and to bring some much needed leadership to the club's administration. In August 1870, Norman T. Gassett, the Circuit Court of Cook County, Chicago. He was elected president. And I've done a lot of research on this, and he was really one well-respected guy. I guess that was. I think a park in Chicago is named after him. And he knew everybody. He was a hard worker. He was very, very well respected. And within a couple of weeks, the catcher and the perennial malcontent guy named Bill Craver was let go, accused of gambling, insubordination, and having a, quote, utter disregard of the rules, according to the club's minutes. And as the book Baseball in Old Chicago put it, the pieces of the ball club all started to, quote unquote, gel properly. And on August 30th, the White Stockings beat the Brooklyn Athletics, 12-4, no small feat, considering that the Atlantics, in June had given Cincinnati its first loss in more than a year. Chicago players followed this victory with a 13-6 win over the Forest City Club of Rockford in Rockford, Illinois. Now, when Jimmy Wood was tasked to form a baseball club for Chicago, one of the objectives was to establish a team that would beat the hated Cincinnati Red Stockings, the arrogant Cincinnati Red Stockings, and they did indeed. And after the second game on October 13th, 1817, a 16-13 Chicago victory, the Cincinnati Daily Gazette wrote, quote, "We were beaten. We know it. We feel it. But how could we help it? The umpire was against us. The weather was against us. The crowd was against us. The heavens were against us. The ground was against us. The pestilential air of the Chicago River was against us. The Chicago Nine was against us. And last but not least, the score was against us." Furthermore, the White Stockings went on a winning streak at the end of the season, and they won baseball's championship. Now, in early 1871, the San Francisco Chronicle noted that Jimmy Wood had organized a very strong team, and he had. They were successful with a 10-8 win against Boston on September 29th, 1871. Chicago was tied with Philadelphia at the top of the National Association, with each team having 18 victories and just 7 losses. Chicago players were looking forward to another game with Athletics on October 17th, 1871. You know what happened that year. They never made it to the train station, unfortunately. There was a little matter of a fire, and not just any fire, of course, and after a blaze broke out on Sunday evening, October 8th, in Patrick and Catherine O'Leary's barn on Chicago's west side, it did not take long for it to incinerate about 3 1/3 square miles in the heart of the city. Included among the property were the White Stockings destroyed with the White Stockings ballpark, the grounds, the homes and possessions of most of the players. Captain Jimmy, to his credit, turned his full attention to his men and their jobs. He wrote the contact of the New York Clipper and asked it to publicize the Chicago team's predicament so that his players could sign new contracts. And that's exactly what the New York Clipper did. In that October 21 issue, it wrote that they got a letter from Jimmy and that because of the fire and all the Chicago club grounds being destroyed, quote, "All players now connected with the club and those engaged for 1872 are released from their engagements and free to seek service with other clubs." Now, the White Stockings played a few games before the season ended at the end of October. And their first stop was in Troy, New York. And they were supposed to play a game on October 12th, but of course, with the Haymakers, but the fire took care of that. So they faced off on October 21. And you can see the White Stockings had in a rather motley assortment of borrowed and mismatched clothing. The arrow here shows Jimmy Wood. The White Stockings won this game, but they lost the second. They played a few more games, and they finished the season in 3rd place with a win-to-loss record of 19-9. Jimmy played for the Troy Haymakers in 1872 and proved to be a very valuable member of the team. Halfway through the season, though, the team ran into financial difficulties. They disbanded. Jimmy and some of the Haymakers then joined his old team, the Eckfords. Brooklyn, in his first game with Jimmy on board, beat the Baltimore by the score of 10-1. And the Brooklyn Eagle, in fact, praised Jimmy and wrote that that, quote, here was another example of the importance of having an efficient man at the wheel, unquote. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. The Brooklyn Eckfords finished their final season with a record of 3 wins and 26 losses. Jimmy Wood was the player captain of the Philadelphia White Stockings in 1873. Unfortunately, his players' hearts just didn't seem to be in the game, and they lost 9 of their last 13 games. But that wasn't really of that much concern for Jimmy. Remember, I talked about Norman Gazette, the new president. He was a leader known for his asserting authority, taking charge. He set off for the East Coast, so I'm going to go get some more players here for the Chicago. And in August 73, the Chicago's papers announced that he had secured a team. He had announced big news. He had engaged a team for the White Stocking team for 1874. Now, Jimmy was naturally elated at all this big news, and he settled down. He put down roots in Chicago. He'd be a Rolling Stone later on, but right now he put down roots. He opened a cigar store at 101 22nd Street. And during the season, baseball fans would be able to buy tickets there to the games. And the Chicago Inter-Ocean newspaper wrote that, quote, Jimmy Wood has now established himself in business in the city. His place will be a general rendezvous for baseball men. Within a year, he expanded his business. He opened a sporting goods store on Chicago State Street. And note the name E.F. Dexter at the bottom. I recognize his name immediately, Edwin F. Dexter. He was treasurer of the White Stockings for quite a while during the 1870s. He may have been like the money man or the financial guy behind Jimmy's store. I'm not sure. This is purely conjecture on my part, but it's interesting that he was affiliated with Jimmy's store. And in real life, in his business he was a businessman and a Chicago bookseller. Now, disaster had struck the White Stockings in 1871 with the Chicago fire, and as Bruce mentioned, it would hit Jimmy Wood. In particular, in general, they hit the White Stockings. In particular, disaster would hit Jimmy in 1873, 1874 off scene. It was probably in April 1874. He uses his pocket knife to dig out an abscess on his left leg. And before he could clean it, though, he had the knife in his hand, and he dropped the knife on his right leg below the knee. And he probably didn't have antibiotics back then. Anyway, infection set in and knocked him out of the game, knocked him out of baseball. He had to stay at home, unable to play at all. Consequently, the White Stockings had to begin the year without him as captain and second baseman. Nicholas Young, who would later be secretary and treasurer of the National League for a long, long time, he would be the team's business manager. Jimmy Wood's absence certainly made a difference, coupled with the poor performance of some of the other players. The Chicago Tribune complained in late June that the team was, quote, wandering listlessly through the eastern states, conquering an insignificant club here and there, and being conquered by everyone in which it would be an honor to defeat. On July 6, 1874, the White Stockings were 5th among the 8 teams in the National Association that had a win-loss record of 9-15. Things got worse 4 days later when Jimmy Wood had to have his right leg amputated due to complications resulting from the cut and the infection. The Tribune related that this would definitely be sad news for Jimmy's countless friends, adding, quote, by his 4th withdrawal from the diamond field, the national game loses one of his best, most honorable, and most gentlemanly players. And the article went on to say that they ought to hold a benefit game for Jimmy Wood. Everybody thought that was a great idea. And that was held between the White Stockings and the Brooklyn Atlantics on July 29 in Chicago. The Chicago Tribune wrote that, quote, his host of friends nobly responded, unquote, to assist him in his hour of need. Several thousand people were there, and they raised $3,000 to benefit Jimmy Wood, the former and very highly respected second baseman of the Chicago Cub. Wood, of course, could no longer play baseball, but though he's in fairly good spirits and in good health too. And one sports writer wrote, quote, sitting in a cigar store on 22nd Street or nimbly hopping about on his crutches with a comely stump swinging in midair, he doesn't present the appearance of one who has seen suffering of the severest kind. The White Stockings, though, never posed much of a threat in 1874. They ended the season number 5 out of 8 teams, 18 and a half games out of first place. The Boston Red Stockings, thanks to the stellar pitching of Albert Spalding, they secured their 3rd consecutive pennant. The Tribune noted that the team helped to do better the following year, and towards that end, White Stockings Secretary William Hubbard, who later would found the National League, of course, in 1876. In fact, the Cubs are celebrating their 150th anniversary this year. Sent Jimmy Wood out east to sign players for 1875. And as Wood told a reporter in late 1874, next year we will be able to boast, a 9 equal to that of Boston. By the way, I managed to go through all of the Chicago Cubs records at the Chicago Historical Society, including all of William Hubbard's correspondence. I got to be pretty good at deciphering his handwriting, and this is one of the better letters I had to decipher here. While poring over the White Stockings records there at the Chicago History Museum, used to be called the Chicago Historical Society, I noticed that Jimmy was really well respected. I got to say this right now, and I'll probably say it again. He was very well respected in baseball all through his life. I come across countless letters from baseball people talking about him. He talked to quite a few amateur clubs and set up games with them. He had a correspondence with, all sorts of people. Club Secretary William Hubbard told National Association Secretary Nicholas Young in early 1875 that, quote, we are going to send Wood to St. Louis next week to arrange 4 games with them. Despite the team's poor showing in 1874, William Hubbard still had faith in Jimmy Wood, and here he tells National Association Administrator Nick Young that Jimmy will continue to be employed by the White Stockings. In fact, he emphatically tells him that Wood will be working during the following year, 1875. In fact, a newspaper noted emphatically that the Cubs' responsibilities, quote, will be greatly lightened by the competent services of Jimmy Wood, who will be the manager of the club, responsible directly to the president. Baseball player John Glenn played for the White Stockings from 1874 to 1875, and here William Hubbard informs him to wait for instructions from manager Jimmy Wood. I found countless letters like these in the correspondence at the Chicago History Museum. And here a Kentucky baseball club official in May 1875 writes manager James Wood about setting up a game with the Chicago Club. By the way, I was telling Bruce that just a couple of weeks ago I turned into the History Press my next Cubs book on the 1880s Chicago Cubs, which as Bill James calls it, was the Cubs' greatest decade. They won 5 pennants then, and I use countless documents from the Cubs archives for this. It's got a lot of great stories in it. It's going to be called The Cubs' First Dynasty, 1880s Baseball in Chicago. Lots of photographs. The History Press is going to put it out. Okay, this has all changed though. Well, Jimmy's got a bum leg, but he's still into baseball. But that would all change though. In the summer of 1875, Secretary Hubbard signed baseball's ace pitcher Albert Spalding for 1876. Spalding would not only join the White Stockings as their field manager or their captain, replacing non-playing manager Jimmy Wood, would also assume the club's secretarial responsibilities. As for Hubbard, he assumed the presidency of the club after President George Gage died in September 1875. By the way, if you if you're familiar with Spalding's autobiography, in it, he says that Hulbert came to him. And no, that wasn't true at all. Spalding came to Hulbert. Um, the White Stockings finished in sixth place in 1875, and the future didn't look very bright for Jimmy in 1876. Baseball was his life, of course. It sure didn't help matters. Or didn't sit well with him not to be on the field. As one reporter said after Wood had his leg amputated, quote, "It was painful indeed to see that model second baseman who had led the old Eckfords to the head of the list in 67 on one leg." Now, not only painful for him to be on the sidelines, on crutches too, but it was also pushed to the sidelines by the club itself, but with Albert Spalding taking over. And what was probably also painful for him was the White Stockings win at the pennant in 1876 without him on the baseball field. But, you know, as much as I like the White Stockings, the Cubs, and Jimmy Wood's kind of a hero of mine anyway, I got to be honest though, you know, he had his problems here too. Those in baseball sympathize with Wood and his predicament. A lot of people recognize his whole managerial shortcomings and believe that Chicago probably be better with somebody else. And the New York Clipper said that as a captain, he was not as successful as he was as a player because, quote, he lacked one or two of the essentials of an able general of a baseball club, that, unquote. Now, the Clipper didn't say what those things were, but he did admit that very few professional players possess the essentials of being baseball captains. Other writers, though, were much more specific. As early as 1871, newspaper articles mentioned that Woods was, quote unquote, excitable, with one saying that was his worst fault. He always wanted to win, the paper noted, but at times, quote, he loses much of his effectiveness by the excitability produced by over-anxiety. In fact, in this Spalding's Baseball Guide for 1896, it called him, as you can see here, a very nervous player. He'd also lose his temper. The New York Clipper said in 1873 that after he fumbled a double play, he threw the ball down on the ground in disgust. An opposing player ran in to score, and amid much laughter and jeers and general loose play all around, quote, 4 runs were added to the score, none earned. Multiple articles point out that he was too easygoing, too lenient. He should be much more strict with the players. The St. Louis Globe-Democrat said that in 1875, quote, "The ill success of the year's 9 is attributable to Wood's leniency to the players, which is truly a part of bad management." Now, although he's not on the Chicago team, he was not out of baseball yet. For early in the 1876 season, it was announced that he would umpire games in the area. Newspapers articles of the time show that he umpired both professional and amateur games, and the conscientious nickname, so nicknamed Woodsy, enjoyed being back on the ball field, and journalists occasionally mentioned him. In one game, a White Stocking player performed very poorly on the field, prompting one sports writer to say, quote, "He made an awful exhibition of himself and not near as good as Jimmy Wood would be, even with his pork leg." So I said Jimmy was pretty well respected. I mentioned that Wood was a nervous player, and in one game, a local newspaper said that although Wood was a very satisfactory umpire, an opposing player declared that on one occasion, quote, "He got so mixed up that he scratched his wooden leg in despair." This, however, is an unwarranted and unproved assertion. He did a good job as umpire. In August, the White Stockings recommended that he serve as an official league umpire for 1877, and he did. He also organized at least one baseball tournament for minor league teams in 1877. Now, at this point, he started bouncing around the country, and it was awful trying to keep track of him. He was all over the place. As Peter Morris and Bill Ryczek point out in their very fine essay on Jimmy Wood in the book Baseball Founders, after Jimmy lost a leg, quote, "he embarked on a series of new ventures." And I found out that in 1862, he moved close to Stark, Florida, where he purchased an orange plantation and also raised peaches. You know, Jimmy was a original hard luck Charlie, though. I'm sorry to say. His attempt at citrus growing was not very profitable. For in 1884, he was back in Chicago. A year later, he was in the laundry business in Memphis. What do you know about doing laundry? In 1889, he was managing the Memphis Grays, which was great. This was a team in the minor league Southern League, which was formed in Atlanta in 1885. And the league was perpetually faced with financial problems and occasionally collapsed and started back up. In 1889, it fielded only 4 teams and collapsed again in the middle of the season, reorganizing again in 1892. In 1890, Jimmy was keeping the ballpark in good condition for the use of baseball clubs practicing in the South, and one sports writer wrote that, quote, some games there would pay, Jimmy thinks, as a town has had no ball for some time. The veteran is still engaged in the laundry business in Memphis. He was also engaged in business itself in the early 1890s. This is something new I didn't know about. He managed the Jackson Mountain Park in Memphis and invested in an opera company that performed at the pavilion here. This amusement park featured 2 large mounds with a bandstand and a dance pavilion built on the largest mound, and then there was a bowling alley, a shooting gallery, and a restaurant on the surrounding area. This park originally had belonged to the Chickasaw, 16th century Native American tribe, and the 2 mounds were ceremonial ones, and the park is now known as the Chickasaw Heritage Park. But let's get back to Jimmy Wood here. The public loved the opera show, but the opera company got most of the money. And there were other activities at the pavilion. It should have been a paying gig. There were dances, there were band concerts. I found all sorts of articles here about the Jackson Mountain Park. There are athletic exercises. It should have been a cash cow, but for some reason the pavilion was not a profitable one. And in fact, a baseball player friend of Jimmy Wood said that, well, quote, he was unlucky in Memphis and never made money here. He came here with a good role, and though he had friends by the thousands, his ventures always turned out badly for himself. The opera show ran for 2 seasons. Then Jimmy moved back to Chicago, where he and former White Stocking ball player Ed Williamson opened a saloon and a restaurant on Dearborn Street called the Wigwam. They remained partners until Williams's death in 1894. In fact, just 2 or 3 years ago, Sabre put a gravestone on Ed Williamson's grave. They finally found out where it was located. Williamson, I think he had cirrhosis of the liver. I think he pretty much drank too much at the Wigwam. He died early. I love this photograph here. One of the only ones I could find of Woods in later years. So he has kind of almost a Dracula-like appearance, I think. Anyway, he continued to bounce around the country all over the place, something of a habit of his. In fact, the Sabre Biographical Research Committee wrote in August of 2006 that, quote, in our long and fruitless search for Wood, we had tracked him to Quebec, to New York, to Ohio, to Illinois, to Tennessee, Louisiana, Florida, and even Pennsylvania. In 1908, he was living in Manhattan. A couple years, unquote, by the way. A couple years later, he was living in Winter Park, Florida. Newspapers in 1914 report him as deceased, but as one sports writer humorously put it, quote, he arises in his own behalf to announce that report was slightly exaggerated, kind of like Mark Twain. Jimmy announces that he is getting along nicely and may even join the Chicago Feds in baseball. Interestingly enough, Jimmy stayed with baseball in a peripheral way, which I think is kind of cool. I'm going to get to that here. Let's backtrack a bit first into his personal life. He was 21 years old when he married Sarah E. Perrine in 1865 in Washington County, Ohio. Okay. She was born in Staten Island in 1844, just a year younger than Jimmy. They had 2 children, Harry Lee Wood and James Leon Wood Jr. James got married and had a daughter. But I'm going to spend my time, most of the time for the rest of this, focusing on their daughter, Carrie, and on her daughter, too. Okay, so they had 2 kids here, Carrie Lee Wood and James Leon Wood, but Carrie is the most important one here. You might have heard of the Temple Cup. Well, daughter Carrie married William Chase Temple in 1884, excuse me. And Jimmy Wood had a lot in common with his son-in-law. Jimmy may have failed as a citrus grower, but Temple was a true citrus baron. He bought an estate and an orange grove in Winter Park, Florida, and developed the Florida Citrus Exchange with other citrus growers to help the entire orange industry. He started a lumber and timber company and became a prominent lumber baron. Unlike Jimmy, whatever he touched, this turned to gold for William Chase Temple. And Jimmy surely took notice of this baseball interest, and he was a president and part owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1891 to 1893. He donated a 30-inch silver trophy, later called the Temple Cup, to the National League, and the first and second league teams would play a postseason best-of-7 series, and the trophy would be awarded to the winner. This was given for 4 years from 1894 to 1897. The trophy is now in baseball's Hall of Fame. And just as an aside, I don't know if this is true for this case, but I found out in all my White Stocking research for the 1880s, the White Stockings and maybe other teams, they didn't put much stock in postseason games. I guess they weren't really paid much for it. And as far as they were concerned, the season ended with the last played game. Well, that's just an aside. Okay, now it's going to get interesting, folks. By the summer of 1924, 80-year-old Jimmy was pretty much alone. Okay, there's his dates up there at the top. He would die in 1827, but as you can see, his wife died in 1893. Long deceased, she died of typhoid and pneumonia at just age 49. Their son, James Jr., he died in 1923. His son-in-law, William Chase Temple, died in 1917, and Temple's wife, the daughter Carrie, Jimmy's and Sarah's daughter, she died on June 11th, 1924. Baseball would again enter Jimmy's orbit when in 1914 his granddaughter Dorothea Temple married Adelbert Dell Mason, formerly a pitcher for the Washington Senators and Cincinnati Reds. Now, if you have your dictionary handy, look up a real piece of work, because that you'll find the picture of Dorothea Temple Mason. Okay. And I wish I could have found out what Jimmy thought of what I'm going to talk about right next. Okay. Florida newspapers rocked with quite a bit of scandal following Carrie's death. This was Jimmy and Sarah's daughter. Their daughter, Dorothea Temple Mason, was the principal, no, not the sole heir to her parents' vast estate, which was valued at $250,000, not the mere $150,000 shown here. Also, when Mr. Temple died, he left paid-up life insurance policies valued at $750,000. We're talking a lot of money. Now, Dorothea and her husband, former baseball player Dell Mason, contested the will, which was signed 10 days before her mother's death, on the grounds that her mother had the will drawn up and signed under, quote, the improper and undue influence, unquote, of Carrie's friend Charlotte Bourne. I've got her down at the bottom of the slide here, who was set to inherit $30,000 to $60,000 of jewels, as well as, quote unquote, valuable laces. Okay, so Dorothea and baseball player Dell Mason, they were going to contest Carrie's will because Charlotte had undue influence on the mother Carrie. Now, Jimmy's caregiver, one Dorothea Miller, age 47, I include here on the bottom here too, testified for the defense that she had known Jimmy Wood, Carrie's father, for about 10 years. And she disclosed that at Carrie's request and an expense, she had cared for Jimmy during the past 7 years, and she was also a companion to Carrie. Well, of course, she might have had some undue influence too. So the prosecution went after her, and she said that she had been ordered out of the house for quote unquote improper conduct around Jimmy Wood, and they accused her of doing undue massages, giving Jimmy undue massages. They asked her, "Have you been giving massages to Jimmy Wood?" And she vehemently denied all accusations. And in court, her response to all this was an emphatic, "Absolutely not." And now remember this name, Dorothea Miller, because she's going to come up at the end here too. It's very kind of important to wrapping all this thing up. The court proceedings lasted for 5 weeks, and it was all front page news. I found countless articles in the Florida papers about this. Multiple lawyers were involved, many people testifying. The court transcripts amounted to 1,000 typed pages. And I got the impression from the newspaper articles that they all thought she was a real piece of work too. It came as no surprise when the judge ruled against the Mace's petition to contest the will. And for her part, Dorothea did not come out of this looking very well, especially when it was found out that she had had an ongoing affair with the family doctor. And I guess it broke up when her father pointed out that the doctor could not really support her in the style to which she had been accustomed. One newspaper said, quote, "The proceedings have been the longest, a case admittedly the most important ever heard in Orange County." Now, Jimmy Wood spent time in New York, in Florida, New Orleans, and I learned, when it was corroborated by Bill Ryczek and Peter Morris in their fine essay, that he had, and I've got this impression too, he had a very productive and very happy life, despite all these adversities of losing a leg for starters, and then losing his wife, his daughter, and his son on top of that, and probably having to endure at least some degree of humiliation with this court trial. But I never found anything about what he thought about it all, not one thing. And I wish I had. Baseball was always on Jimmy's mind. This was his life, baseball. I came across countless articles in which sports writers would comment on letters they had received from him. He kept in touch with everybody. He had a wide circle of baseball friends. He kept in touch with most of them. Al Spink, founder of the Sporting News, he would always write about Jimmy Wood. He was a frequent correspondent. In 1916, Jimmy sat down with sports writer Frank G. Menke, who was interviewed him for a series of 6 syndicated newspaper articles called Baseball of Bygone Days. He also kept in touch with White Stocking organizer Tom Foley and other former players as well. Good old John Thorne reprinted these in his column, by the way, in his Our Time blog, which was very good of him. I tracked down his death certificate thanks to Bill Ryczek and especially Peter Morris, who came across that he died in San Francisco. He was living in New Orleans. Jimmy Wood was living in New Orleans. They went to San Francisco to have cataract surgery. There were some complications, and he died there. And look, I guess his caregiver, Dorothea Miller, traveled with him she is listed here as the informant, and that kind of surprised me. Why was Dorothea Miller? Well, I guess he needed a caregiver, so she was with him. Note that pneumonia and heart disease contributed to his death as well there. Wrapping things up here a bit. As I said, there's some confusion about Jimmy Wood's life, especially about his later years. Here's a page from RIP Baseball. Now, Jimmy Wood's son died in 1923 in New Orleans. I could not find where he was buried. Jimmy and Sarah's daughter, Carrie, died in Winter Park, Florida. She is buried there. Here is Jimmy Wood's grave in Greenwood Cemetery in New Orleans. And that RIP column wonders who Dorothea Miller was. Well, she was Jimmy's caretaker here. And this really surprised me. You'll recognize her name. This rather surprised me. She was 52 when she died, and apparently she is buried with him. You could see both their names there on the gravesite, tombstone there. Jimmy's wife died in Chicago. Most sources say she was buried there, though Ancestry says Pittsburgh, where she lived at one time and where both of her children were born. So this was really surprising, this part here. And I'm glad I was able to verify who this Miller person was who was buried with Jimmy Wood. As I said, John Thorne called Jimmy Wood a mystery man. He got a kick out of some of these things that I found out. We had corresponded about it. The mystery still continues. One can't help but wonder, though, why weren't Jimmy and Sarah buried together? Why was the caretaker presumably buried at his graveside 2 years after his death? Well, maybe because she was the only person still living at that time, besides his granddaughter, I guess. By the way, that RIP baseball column says that she might have been related to Jimmy. This was not true at all. In fact, when she testified in the Florida court, she said that she met Jimmy and his wife in a restaurant in 1914, she met Jimmy and his son at a restaurant in 1914, 1915. A friend introduced her to them. She stayed in touch with both of them, both him and his daughter, Carrie, and eventually became a companion to her and a caregiver to him, and presumably stayed with him until he died. So as I said, the mystery continues. It seems that more research needs to be done. Here's a little bit more information on Sarah, showing that this source here says that she died she was buried in Pittsburgh, while other sources say that she died other places. Yeah, it's one of she died in Chicago, and some sources say she died in Chicago. This source says she died in Pittsburgh. Anyway, the mystery continues. More research needs to be done, but wrapping things up here on a baseball note, here are a couple of entries from Baseball Reference and Retro Sheet. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Once again, Jack Bales bringing the
Thank
heat.
you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
I had a lot of fun with this, as you can imagine.
I can tell, man. I can tell.
I love this.
The one thing that always strikes me when I have folks on who start talking about 19th century baseball is the writing and the way people refer to one another or how they write about the games. And you touched on a couple of those things during your presentation. And I always get a kick out of that because of how language was used back then. And you kind of even channeled it a little bit.
Yeah.
You said, look up piece of work in the dictionary.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I love that part. Yeah. I uncovered this by Dorothea Miller, and the daughter said, "What is going on here with this scandal?" I'd never heard that, and it's not in Bill's and Peter's essay either. So they might have known about it, but I don't know. But I did ask Ed Hardig, the Cubs historian, about it. He said he had heard something about that.
Just and the thorough way that you research each of your subjects is incredible.
Thank you, Bruce.
And
Thank you very
much. I'm thrilled when you agree to do these for us because they're always fantastic. I can't say enough good things, but I also want to say, hey, if you have a question for our presenter, Jack Bales, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You'll see another button marked raise hand. Raise your hand. We'll get you in line to ask questions of Jack Bales tonight. Karen Holleran had a question toward the end of your presentation. Karen, where are you? Let's get her unmuted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
There she is. Karen, you had a question. Yeah. Go.
Okay, I have a question. If you could make a movie of this whole mess, which is hysterical.
Yeah.
Who would you have?
Oh, Lord. Oh, yeah, let me say. Well, I've always thought Gal Gadot would be a pretty cool person to play at least Carrie, Wonder Woman, she has that kind of like mysterious air about her, you know.
Oh.
Brad Pitt might be a good Jimmy Wood.
Can he do the limp though? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Gary Joquin had a really good comment in the chat about. Let me find. Hold on a second here. One of the things he said was, "I'm blown away by what I'm watching a presentation about a guy who died nearly 100 years ago." And in the chat, tetanus and penicillin vaccines were not invented until 1924 and 1928, respectively. Wood was lucky to survive an infection in 1874. Really?
I did not know that. I never thought about that. Thanks for bringing that comment up.
That's from Gary Joquin.
Thank you. Thank you.
He has been enjoying your presentation tonight as well, and that's a very good point, because it adds just a little bit more nuance there. That it just more to the legend, so to speak. So, just now, is this being? I forget, and I'm sorry, but is this being made into your next book? Is this?
No, I'm not. That next book will be just on the 1880s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the book after this, I wouldn't mind taking the White Stockings before the Civil War and ending maybe with the formation of the National League, and therefore I will probably incorporate it in that book.
Okay. Anything Jack Bales writes is going to be informative and entertaining, and you should grab it when it comes out. Yeah. Gary Joquin, how are you? I haven't seen you in far too long. How have you been?
Oh, just super busy here in Oregon. Too much volunteer work to do.
Grief.
Hey, I was just curious about, I guess, two things. One, I noticed that the Saber bio for Jimmy Wood is unassigned, and if
really
you might be interested in.
Well, yeah.
There you go. And two, I was intrigued, curious about you being in a library, and given your librarian background, I was wondering what care is required, what kind of access are you given, what is it like to handle documents that are 100 years old and older? What's the access like?
Well, in my library, I worked at a university library, and I was just an ordinary reference librarian and specializing in the humanities. But we have a special collections there, and anybody can kind of come in and use them. They might have to use gloves or something like that, but anybody can handle documents. But like when I was at the Chicago History Museum, I handled William Hubbard's original papers, and I knew both the librarians there real well, and we had to wear gloves and all that, but you could just walk in off the street. I made appointments all the time. I'm in Virginia, so my family lives outside of Chicago, so I just stay at home, and I have a twin brother, and we take the train in every day to Chicago, and we just camp out there all day long, and they were good to work with. I took photographs with my phone, or sometimes I made copies. They've readily granted me permission to use these on my presentation. Some of them I have some of these things for Hubbard in the latter part of Jimmy, some of these William Hubbard things are going to be in my 1880s book, in fact, because he died in 1884, I think it was, and so I cover him and his comments with some of the players. I came across there's a famous quote by Hubbard that says, "I'd rather be lamppost than a streetcar in every other city," or something like that. I came across another one that he says something like I've never heard before. It was buried in one of his letters that says something like, I can make a living on out of baseball in a barren island when other people couldn't make a living in a city of 2 million people," which I have in the book. Which I thought was a great quote. I've never really heard it before, So I had a lot of fun doing it. The people there were tremendous. The staff there was fantastic, and in fact, I mentioned them in the book, and they're excited about it. It was a lot of fun doing it. A lot of fun.
Well, last question is one I like to typically ask is, when did the interest in late 19th century baseball ignite? What was the trigger?
Well, my very first book was about the Cubs it was called Before They Were the Cubs. And it was a kind of a combination history and a reprinting of original documents because I'd written some literary stuff before this and I wanted to do something fun. And I always liked the Cubs. And no one had ever really written much about the 19th century. And I thought, why write about Lincoln or Shakespeare or anything? It's been done to death, but no one has written about the 19th century. One person did this. There was one book on the Bury My Heart at Wrigley Field. That was the only book. And so I started immersing myself in the primary sources. And then I just really got fascinated with this. I'm a pretty active member of the 19th Century Sabre Baseball Committee. And Joanne and Karen, you've been involved with that too, I know. And some of you other ones, Dixie and other people. And that kind of really kept my interest going. I try to do a talk for them once a year. I don't know, Bruce, if I've done for you. I talk about a real piece of work. William Hubbard was a real piece of work too, besides playing on the National League. I found a lot of good stuff about him. If I haven't done that talk before, I mean, I have some great stories about William Hubbard. He sold his team down the river. He sold his stockholders down the river. He had one person in mind all the time himself.
Uh,
Michael Haupert and I have exchanged stories about William Hubbard.
The Holberg quote is, "I'd rather be a lamppost in Chicago than a millionaire in any other city."
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
Okay. Gary Joquin is spot on correct. Jimmy Wood's bio is not done by the Bio Project. And I'm thinking that you've probably got 95% of it done.
You probably may have a good point there, Bruce. Maybe so. Yeah.
I think we've got ourselves somebody who could fill a hole for us rather quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. I never knew that.
So yeah, I had to hit it up to see as if there was something that might have been missed, but no, you go right out to you search his name, he comes up, and the baseball reference link goes to what you just showed us. And his bio's not done yet. I would implore you, with all the research that you've done, to get in touch with the Bio Project.
I did one on Hubbard's sidekick, Lewis Meacham, which was kind of cool because he had two names, he had two birth dates, he had served two terms in the Civil War. That took forever to track down.
Ryan McClanahan in the chat says Nicolas Cage could play Jimmy Wood. I could see that.
Yeah, I could see that too. That's a great idea. Nicolas Cage. Yeah. Perfect, I think. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Love it. Next up, last one for tonight is my wife and the vice chair of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter, Molly McClure. Molly, what do you got?
Jack, first of all, thank you so much for presenting. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much, Molly, too. Thanks to everybody from that matter. You all made my day.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Slightly off topic, but I was wondering if you had either direct me in the direction of Civil War era baseball rules, or if you had something you could email us.
I think I might be able to do that. Yeah. I do have something about that, I think.
Yeah. Molly's son is a Civil War reenactor.
And
he's asked a couple of times about this.
Yeah.
And there's 6 teenagers in the regiment, which is wonderful. And they're having essentially a boys' night in my dad's backyard. And they're having the campfire and doing all the fun stuff. So I was hoping to get the rules for baseball for them for that.
Yeah. I have an online publication that I picked up some time ago. It's right on my desktop. I'll take a look after we get done here.
Okay.
I don't know how far back it goes, but it goes back pretty far. I know that.
Okay.
South will rise again.
Yeah, right now. Hey, that's where I am.
I give Matt, I give Ian a hard time about that frequently when he's talking about his Civil War reenacting. I'll come out with that. I'll just give me the look. Hey, Joanne, what do you got? Joanne Hulbert, you're up.
What I have for Molly is, if you want Civil War era rules, and this is New England, then you're going to have to look at the Massachusetts game rules, because that's what they were playing, up to and a little bit into the Civil War. So if you really want to get historical, you can use the Massachusetts game rules, which are really a lot of fun to try to get kids to play it. I mean, it's very straightforward, but it makes it so different from the New York style rules. But it's a real thing.
That's right. Joanne, that came up at one of our 19th century meetings. I remember we had a whole meeting on that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
we did. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can Google it. Massachusetts game rules. The sheets come up that are put out by the Hall of Fame library and all.
Oh,
Otherwise, yeah, it is. It's available, and it's kind of fun. We play it down here in Massachusetts. We have a game coming up on May 16th down here in Holliston. And I think they're going to be playing by 19th century rules, but I don't know what type because the team that's hosting it has known to be played by two different sets of rules, be it New York, for the less brave. And for the braver people, we bring out the Massachusetts game rules.
I now know what the topic of conversation at Pizza with Pete is going to be tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
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 Craig Garrettson in the chat recommends that my wife reach out to Sabre member Sam Bernstein, who is an umpire for 19th century games. We can get his email through the Sabre community. Mark Cantor, where are you?
I'm right here.
Mark, you have a question? What's going on, man? How are you?
I have a question. Has nothing. Hope you don't mind. And it's
Not at all.
I'm in a bit of a bind. I have been asked by Father Jerry Byrne if people know who he is. If people know who he is, Father Byrne's 90 years old. Father Len Levin ran the Southern New England chapter for many years. Now we have a void. And Father Byrne asked me to go try to find some stuff. And I talked to Linda Levin, Len's wife. I've got the list from Sabre, I got the list of members of the Southern New England chapter. But I'm going to write an email to everybody in the area. There is a meeting that's scheduled for June 20th. However, if Joanne can answer me something, I talked with Joanne, I talked with Jay, and he said that's the Malloy conference that weekend. Is that the Malloy conference, June 20th?
That sounds correct.
So
yeah.
Right now we have Rob Fitz, who's supposed to talk at Stephen Trimble's church in North Attleboro.
Beautiful church.
So should I, in fact, try to change the date of that meeting to the 27th? Because Len Levin's celebration of life is going to be on the 13th. I just need help. I need help because I don't want to run it, but Father Byrne, who's 90, he doesn't want to run it either. So I need help. I need help in getting speakers and other things. So
so that's where I come in.
All right, thank you, Bruce.
So yeah, why don't we talk through email or something in the next couple of days?
All right.
About this subject, because I think I can help.
All right.
I can give you some tips on getting presenters and whatnot, but if you probably have my email address already.
I do.
Send me an email and let's have a conversation about that, because and detail in it, if you would please, the scheduling issues that you have. And I can probably give you some advice on that as well, because that was the first thing I thought of when Len left us was, oh man, what is going to happen down there? Because up until I think it was like a few days before he passed, I think Bill Nolan was telling me that he was still working.
Right.
Oh, God bless him. Are they having a public celebration of his life at any point?
I talked to Linda Levin today, and Linda says her daughters are setting it up. She has nothing to do with it. It's been too much for her.
I'm sure
that the daughters and she think it's going to be on the 13th of June.
Okay.
And
so the 13th of June is a Saturday. Okay.
It's a Saturday. And the 20th, right, there is a meeting that scheduled for the 20th, but I haven't been able to talk to Stephen Trimble. And I think we ought to probably move it to the 27th. Because of the Malloy conference.
Mm-hmm. I would not schedule anything around Malloy, but let's talk about that through email. Send me an email with all of this, and let's discuss this over the next couple of days.
I will. Thank you. I'm sorry to bother you about this, but I'm in a bit of a bind.
All right, so I'm going to put this out to everybody right now because Mark just made an interesting comment. He's behind his screen apologizing for wanting to participate. Respectfully, I say to you, Mark, and everybody else here, don't do that. We want as much presentation out of as many people throughout the country as possible. So anytime somebody says, "Hey, I've got something," or "I need something," that should be celebrated, accepted, and brought to light so that we can all work together as a community for everybody's good.
Thank you.
So yes, we want to help, and send me something offline, and we're gonna work on that with you. Okay.
I will. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Happily. My pleasure. My pleasure. Hey, you know what? Let's do this again next week because this is fun. And May 4th, we've got another good one coming up, 7:00 Eastern. This is a rescheduled meeting from a while back when we were supposed to have our guy Kirk McKnight and his book, The Voices of Baseball, the game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime. Kirk had a scheduling conflict, so he agreed to do this again with us next week. And it's a really good book, and you really want to be involved in this because I think Kirk is going to be a great presenter. Gary Joquin, go. I think Gary just froze.
There we go.
There
I just wanted to comment that I was reminded by a friend today that today is the official Babe Ruth Day, commemorating an event that was hosted for him near the end of his life in Yankee Stadium.
That's right. That's right. Ryan McClanahan also has it in the chat. May the 4th be with you. We'll run that joke next week. So like I say, May 4th, 7:00, Kirk McKnight is going to be with us. The Voices of Baseball, the game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime. The sign-up link is available in the chapter meeting booklet and at the Sabre events calendar. And finally, if you are a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you aren't yet a member, oh, come on. You need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community, offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom. Sabre boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world, just like Jack Bales. For more information, go to sabre.org today. Jack Bales, I got to say it again, you're extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Good job, man. Appreciate
Thanks very
you.
much.
Let's get everybody out of here so you can watch a little baseball.
Thanks.
See you next week.
Sure.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.